What's up, everybody? My name is Gabriel. Most people call me Gabe. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you've seen a couple of my videos before, welcome back. Right here's my 1991 Mazda RX-7. We've been doing a couple projects, kind of biting more than we can chew at the moment, but we're getting ready for our event with Toga to Track in May. I believe we're going to be at Streets of Willow. So what I've done so far, I've replaced the brake hardline that goes from the front of the car to the back. I installed a clutch master cylinder from Chase Base. It's a Woolwood model. And then I also installed their 2-piston brake booster elimination. So right now, before I actually plumb up the lines and start bleeding everything, I actually have some real estate back there by the firewall to get to work on the steering column. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be converting from power steering to electric power steering. So the first part of it is going to be replacing my power steering rack with the manual rack that I sourced off of Facebook Marketplace. So currently I have that at the shop getting rebuilt with some family friends. So what I'm going to be working on today is getting my OEM column, pulling it out, and then installing this bad boy. So this bad boy is from ePower Steering. They're out in Ramona, California. So it requires you to source your own OEM column. You take it to them, swap it out for theirs. And this big piece right here, which is pretty huge, is actually off a Saturn Vue. And surprisingly, the manufacturer for this unit is Koyo. I haven't had the best experience with Koyo radiators, so I'm hoping I don't have those issues with their electric power steering unit. So everything looks pretty straightforward. So I'm going to pull out my OEM column, install this bad boy, run some wires to the power and negative terminals and my battery in the back, tap into a switch 12-volt ignition, and that should be it. So let's dive right in. Okay, so let's go over the column. It comes in 3 pieces, so this is pretty much what you're accustomed to on the FC column. This is the unit itself, and then this is the piece, the spline that goes towards the steering rack, so this is what goes through the firewall. You have the controller or computer for the electric steering here. You have a pretty beefy power and negative cable that they give you. Then you have a little controller knob that you can set up wherever you want. And everything pretty much goes into this unit right here. So on the left, this is actually coming from the ignition source. This goes to that big power and negative ground cable that they give you. And this goes to the actual column itself. You'll see this beefy cable coming out of the column. But other than that, it looks pretty self-explanatory. When I picked up the unit from the guys, they told me that there's this Allen, I guess, little bolt that you have to really crank down. I mean, not over crank, but so that it's pretty much like a safety pin essentially. Then the orientation of the front part of the column only goes one way, so you have 3 M6 bolts, so you have to just tighten those down. And on the back side as well, once I put the spline back on, let's move out this cable right here. I'm gonna get this nut out, and you can see there's a stud. So you'll line everything up on the spline right here, and then you're gonna want that little stud to go on this crevice right here, and then you'll just pretty much use this nylon lock nut, tighten it down, and that'll be another safety. But that's pretty straightforward. It doesn't look overly complicated. So like I was mentioning, I didn't plumb the rest of the car because I wanted some additional real estate. So granted, this is the Chase Bay brake booster elimination, but if I had the regular booster, it'd be sticking out a lot more. So luckily, I'll be pulling that out and getting down to the actual steering column. There's a nut there that I've already let some PB Blaster penetrate for a couple days, actually a week at this point. But get that bolt out, go on the back side. There's 4 bolts that hold the column, disconnect the ignition and any other plugs that are connected to the actual column itself, and that should be it. I am possibly going to have to remove my seat so I can route the cables from the unit to my battery in the back, which is behind the passenger, but it's pretty straightforward. So let's see how it goes. I also forgot to mention, so since we're going to electric power steering, I'm also going to be removing the power steering pump, the bracket that holds the power steering pump and the AC pump, the high side hose of the power steering, the low side hose, and the power steering cooler, which sits right in front of the oil cooler. For my Turbo 2 motor that I'm going to be building, I had bought the Franklin Engineering side mount alternator, but since I'm going to have all this real estate, might as well just bring it to this motor. As you can see, I don't have an alternator right now, so I'm going to be relocating the alternator from here, the OEM spot, to the right. So it'll clean up the engine bay, but it's kind of future-proofing it. So when we get to the Turbo 2 motor and we drop it in, charge piping will be a lot easier. So that's kind of the future intention, but it's a benefit that can help this motor as well, because we're not done with it yet. So yeah. So I started separating the column and the intermediate shaft. It's just a 12mm bolt. It's a lot easier not having the brake booster in the master cylinder there. I did have to use a little bit of PB blaster to separate the two, but ultimately no challenges here, and I'll take it. As you can see, it started sliding right out. So I started taking off the bolts that hold down the seat bracket. If you've never taken them off on an FC, they are very, very fragile threads, so be very careful. If not, they're already probably stripped. I know the FDs, the Miatas have the same issues, so be very careful. The reason I'm taking off the seat is to give us clearance when we run that power and ground wire from the controller all the way to the battery back there. So that's pretty much it, and to add a little bit of real estate, because I feel like we're going to need it when we're going to pull the column out. So I had already started the thread, so it's not like I quickly took them off. But let's get this bad boy out. There we go. So much room for activities now. Now we'll get rid of, well, not get rid of, but remove the quick release and the hub, this little column, and then we should start disconnecting a lot of the connectors under the column, and then start working on those bolts and pull it out. So now I'm going to start disconnecting some of the connectors under the column, take this bezel out, and then start working on those 4 bolts that hold the column so we can pull it out towards the roll bar. And I think that should be it. I'm hoping. I've never done this before. I've taken dashes off multiple times on FCs, but never the column. So this is a new experience for me too. So I ended up moving my way into the inside of the car. At this point, we're getting ready to install the new column. So we had to remove this column, but in order to do that, we had to remove everything off the column. So like the ignition switch, just those connectors, we're removing it all at once. So what I ended up doing was removing the steering wheel, the quick release, and the hub itself. There's a nylon lock nut that holds the hub into place. So once I removed that, I put the nut back on along with the wheel, and I wiggled the hub to get it out of the spline. So it's pretty straightforward. Just be careful if you're doing that. I've read online where some people just yank on the hub with the nut not in place anymore, and then they end up hitting themselves in the face. So yeah, we're just prepping the column here. And while you're watching me do my work, if you like the content that I'm putting out, feel free to like and subscribe. It lets me know that the effort I put into recording my work is actually meaningful and some people care about it. So yeah, hit that like and subscribe. So once we got the hub off, I moved forward to take off the column. There's just 2 bolts under the cluster and then 2 bolts behind the brake pedal. I had to have my dad help me out, so he went to the engine bay side to separate the column and the intermediate shaft. Just make sure everything's disconnected and you're not pulling on any wires. It would have been a lot easier for me if I would have pointed the column up towards the roof so I can actually slide it out easier, but you learn the hard way sometimes. But we did take off the column without breaking anything, so I'll take that as a win. All right, so we got the OEM steering column off. I had a lot of issues with the little screws that go here. It's actually an M5 bolt, so I'm going to be replacing those, but just be very careful. The head of the actual screw stripped on me, so that took me a little while to get out. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but other than that, the removal of the actual OEM column was pretty straightforward. While I was trying to yank it out, my dad got on the other side, so the side closest to the motor. He kind of wiggled it. He had to fight the boot a little bit to get this piece out, but other than that, it wasn't too difficult. So here's the OEM column, and then we've already assembled the EPS unit. Everything looks the same. I've already tightened this little screw down as much as I can, and then we're gonna put a little bit of lube on the shaft right here so it can slide through the firewall, but we should be good to go. So let's give it a go. All right, so this little tolerance is giving us some issues, so we're gonna lube it correctly. So, you know, you wanna lube it like this. And if you know what this means, you guys are sick fucks. But yeah, there you go. A little bit right here. So what we're doing here is we installed the little intermediate shaft that the column actually goes through to protrude past the firewall. So I just had Caleb hold it for me while I was tightening the two nuts. I also wanted to make sure that I didn't pinch or hit that power wire right there since I have my battery relocated to the rear. But this is pretty straightforward. As you can see, there's nothing there. So we went inside the car, and now it was time to install the electric power steering unit itself, which is the whole column. So slid it right through that intermediate shaft. That's why we put a little lubrication on that before. And the first thing I noticed, as you can see here in the video, is that the whole unit wants to rotate to the right. And that's because the weight is on the right. If you can see that big black piece on the right, that's the actual motor itself. So it's just rotating. So what I decided to do was like, okay, I'm going to have to spot it, and I'm going to put a couple of hand threads right under the column itself. So the top 12 millimeter bolts. So I got a couple threads by hand here. Then I went along and I put on the other bolt. As you can see, it was fighting me because of those little clips. So once I kind of aligned everything, it was pretty groovy. And I used the torque sensing feature of my Milwaukee to make sure I didn't strip anything. I just wanted to make sure everything was somewhat bolted down. I hadn't torqued it yet, but I just wanted to inspect everything, make sure I didn't rip any wires, which would have been the worst piece. As you can see, I have a red and green wire underneath. Those are for some accessories that I have on the car. And then I started loosening the bolt just a little bit so I can straighten out those little retention C-clips, if you want to call them. And then I started adjusting the column, and at this point I kind of noticed that it wasn't adjusting up and down. It's binding a little bit on the little metal tabs. And also, if you're going to see, actually you're going to see in the next couple of minutes, is that we forgot to put the ignition switch on. So we had to remove the column from those two bolts that I placed. And here we go, we're putting it on. Normally on the stock FC, it's kind of just a stud that you have to break. That's only for the first time. After that, you can use your own bolts. So I have some Allen wrench bolts here. Makes my life so much easier, but granted, I can't fit an Allen wrench once the column is actually bolted up to the dash. So that's why we removed the two bolts, brought it down. Here you can see Caleb and I struggling to spot it and tighten it at the same time. And granted, there is an actual little groove that the ignition switch has to be in right underneath the column right here. It's a little square, so it has to sit perfectly, else probably gonna have some starting issues. So here we're just tightening the bolt down. I'm over here holding the column. As you can see, it still wants to shift to the right because all the weight's on the right. And patiently just letting Caleb help me out while I'm holding everything. But yeah, that's a pro tip. Make sure you put the ignition switch on before you bolt the column. And this is like ugga tight. It doesn't have to be torqued down. So what we did here now is install the bolts back on to put the column towards the dash. So as you can see, those little retention clips just want to slide out. Pain in the ass. So I had Caleb hold it. He did have to get in the way a little bit, but we proceeded to just install those two 12 millimeter bolts and get the column up against the dash, and then we'll start inspecting to make sure we have any clearance issues, if we ripped any wire, God forbid. But it's pretty straightforward. Use the Milwaukee torque setting again to make sure everything was pretty good, and that's it. Okay, so we mocked everything up, but we were having an issue where the spline wasn't going through, so we weren't able to put this bolt in. So what we ended up doing is we put the nut that goes on the steering column, like a nylon lock nut. So we put it right on the front. We got a rubber mallet and kind of just tapped it lightly. I'll probably replace this anyway, but that pretty much put everything in the line on the shaft out here. So we come back right here, it's a full hole. So you just get that bolt that we took out originally, and no issues. You can even put it in by hand, which is a good thing. And that's pretty much it. That was pretty straightforward, to be honest with you.
Can you explain what you just did?
So we were having just the slightest clearance issue with the steering column tilting up and down. It was hitting this piece right here, and every time I would try to connect these two together and tilt it up because my steering angle is up, this would disconnect and it bugs the shit out of me, especially since I bought these new. So why not just Dremel it a little bit? The things we do, I swear to God. Okay, so I'm still having issues with the tilt making contact with the cluster surround, and kind of looking at it, I think I got ahead of myself. So I should have been patient and gone on the RX7 club before cutting this, but oh well. So essentially what I can do is I can unbolt the actual intermediate shaft. So this intermediate shaft from here to there, I can loosen it and I should be able to move the column back towards the back of the car. So I should be able to get about hopefully a 1/4 of an inch, and that'll give me the clearance so that the tilt column won't make contact with the shroud. So I'm gonna give that a shot before I cut it, but I'm already annoyed that I had to cut it a little bit. I should have been patient, so I'm here figuring it out. So at this point, a couple of days had passed. I work on the car outside, so since it was raining, I wasn't working on the car. So I finally had a chance to go outside, and I started by taking off the power steering pulley and the pump. I had to use a pulley puller, so I ended up having to put the pulley back on, and kind of struggling with the tool since it's been a while since I've used it. Shout out to my buddy Bill for letting me borrow the pulley. So started off by taking off the pulley. As you can see, I'm struggling here. So give it a few seconds to watch me struggle with this, but yes, we finally got it off. Then we proceeded to undo the lines. So I undid the return line. I put it into an E2N green tea bottle that I had laying around. If you know me, you know I love drinking that stuff. Then on the high side, I started undoing the power steering hose there. Then an electrolyte bottle to, just in case, you know, any fluid fell, we can minimize how much fluid is falling into my engine bay because it's a pain in the ass to clean. So just like that, the power steering pump is out. I had no issues with the power steering pump. If you notice a little red rag there, it's because the little seal likes to not seal. And after some hot sessions on the track, I have power steering fluid, you know, kind of on my hood. So then I proceeded to taking off the actual bracket itself, the power steering bracket. It's about 4 bolts or 4 nuts at this point. And then once I took that off, I proceeded to actually take off the 4 studs, 2 on the front cover, then 2 on the front iron. It's been a while, yeah. And then I decided to put on the Franklin Performance side mount alternator bracket. Pretty straightforward. And yeah, that was the whole intention of this electric power steering setup, so I can have space in the engine bay. Okay, so I just wanted to do a side-by-side comparison between the power steering rack that we took out. And then we have down here a manual rack off of 86 FC, so Series 4. If you're sourcing a manual rack, just make sure that you get the brackets. I know the passenger side is different. I'm not too sure about the driver side, but just in case, get both. And then I already got the new poly bushings for this. I don't know the name of the company off the top of my head, but you can buy them on eBay. They have them for both the power steering and the manual rack. Just make sure it states which one. So what we're going to do now is just move over the Super Now tie rod end links, put them over here, kind of try to get the same distance. I know my alignment's going to be shot anyway, but whatever, we're going to kind of wing it. And yeah, so we're going to throw the manual rack back on and then keep moving forward. Okay, so I started prepping the power steering rack to get removed. I took off this little boot that covers the joint right here. So there's two M6 bolts, one right there, one back there, and then there's one more actually back there by the oil pan, so you can access it from the bottom of the car, bottom of the subframe. Then I have to remove these 4 bolts here for this bracket and these 2 bolts here. I'm swapping a manual steering rack in, so this passenger side bracket is actually different. Then we go to the tie rods, so there's one on each side, and we have to remove this bolt. And then what I remember, it's been a while, I do have to drop the sway bar, and I actually have to take off these brackets too, but it'll give me the clearance to be able to pull out the steering rack. And then if you can see right here, I have the lines for the power steering cooler. This is the power steering cooler right there. I didn't undo it because I really don't want to make more of a mess, so I'm just gonna pretty much take it out all at once. But yeah, I'm gonna get that out, then we'll get the manual steering rack in there. Okay, it's been a couple days, but we got some work done. We got the manual steering rack on along with the poly bushings. My alignment's all messed up, but that was expected. We have the side mount alternator bracket installed. Just need to throw on the alternator. So you can see the column's all bolted up and torqued down to spec. Same thing with that top bolt over here. It's that little bolt down there. Just follow the little finger. So at this point, I made my way to the back of the car and I started taking off the driver's side storage bin. I also removed the fire extinguisher. It's kind of a tight fit now that I have the auto power roll bar, but I was able to manage to get my body in there. If you notice right here, I do have my battery relocated. I'm using the LRB Relocation Kit. Highly recommend the product. It's really good. It's really nice. But essentially right here, what I'm trying to do is clear up enough space and separate the 2 pieces that is the storage bin so that I can start routing the power and ground cable from the electric power steering controller. Okay, so back here, I took off the driver storage bin and I started running that power and ground cable to the ECU. So underneath, along the lines where the rest of the harness goes, I ended up breaking my circuit breaker for my battery in the back. So what I ended up doing for now is just taping the positive terminal so that it doesn't make contact with any ground and cause a spark, which it did a few minutes ago because I'm an idiot. So I'll just replace that. But essentially, I'm just going to tuck this power and ground cable and then connect it to the ECU right there, and then we're pretty much almost ready to get the EPS going. All right, so I got the ECU mounted under the dash. There's actually 2 M6 studs. There's one way back there, light it right there, and there's one right there. I'm lighting it right there. So the bracket almost lines up, so what I ended up doing was drilling an additional hole and boring it out a little bit so that I can have some wiggle room so I can move it left and right. But it mounted pretty well, so I'll take it. The only issue I came across is under the dash on the frame, it kind of has like a little groove to it on the metal, so I ended up just hammering it flat enough so I could get the actual bracket there, and then the bracket did the rest of the work as I torqued down the little nuts. But I'll take that as a win because I couldn't find anywhere I could put this without getting in the way. So I didn't want it in the way of my dead pedal. Of course I didn't want it in the way of the main 3 pedals over here. Nowhere by my right foot that goes on the accelerator. So that ended up working out. And then once I put the dash under panel on, it'll look really low pro. And if you're wondering why this looks different, yes, I am using a convertible dash. So pro tip, convertibles matter. Okay, so I mounted the adjustment knob. So what I did is, this is a convertible bottom piece, right? So I took off this metal plate in the back, then I drilled a hole. There's kind of like these little like indentations on it. Sorry, this thing's broken already, but like for example right here. So I just found a location that wouldn't get in the way of the brackets right here. I drilled the hole through, then I put the plate back on, marked it, and then drilled through it, and then cut out a square so that the little box could fit, and that's how it looks. Obviously on a normal coupe dash, you'll have to kind of figure out where to mount the adjustment knob. I mean, I've seen the Miata ones, they have this little, I guess, trim right here. E-Power Steering has it for the Miatas, but this cable wouldn't have made it to here. It would have been stretched out. Hell, I think it would have been too short anyway. So this is fine. I mean, I'm not, once I have it in the position that I want in terms of adjustment and how much feedback I want from the power steering, I'm not really going to move it. So it's fine. It's out of the way. And then if I need to, it's close by so that I can adjust it on the fly while I'm driving. But that's how it's going to be sticking out. Okay, so we have the interior all back together. Everything's routed in terms of wiring. Here's that adjustment knob. I have it all the way to the left, so essentially it's just manual steering. I did cut this, if you guys are wondering. The guys at Electric Power Steering said you can cut it to your fit, so I just cut it so it's not so close to my knee, just in case. So now, I'm gonna put the key in. So on. You're gonna hear a click back there from the ECU. So right now it's completely manual steering. So I'm gonna put my steering wheel back on. Sorry, my electric fan's going off. So right now I have no assist. This is literally a fucking pain in the ass to just turn this shit. Okay, now let's just get excessive and go all the way to full assist. Takes a few seconds of delay, maybe like 5 seconds. And now, look at that. I can turn the steering wheel left and right, no problem. This is excessive for me. It's way too much assist, it feels numb. So I'm gonna just kind of set it where I had it before, but I haven't driven the car on the road to really gauge the feedback I'm getting. So I'll put it right there. Feels okay, it has a little bit of resistance, but as I drive it more on the street, I'll figure out where I want it, that sweet spot, and then once I like it, we'll take it out to the track. I'm expecting an event sometime in May, and I can do some more adjustments there if I don't like how it feels. But ultimately, this is pretty sick. So my overall experience with installation, it's pretty straightforward. I wasn't too crazy that I had clearance issues here. Like, it's still touching here, and that's what the tilt column, I know a few FCs don't have tilt column, but I could probably try to pull the column out towards me even more. I did give it multiple attempts and I just was over it. So, you know, it is what it is. I like the setup here. Obviously I'm using a convertible dash. Wiring, pretty straightforward. The original wiring they provide with the car for your power and ground wires, it's meant to go to the front of the car. So if you have a battery mounted in the back like I do, just ask the guys for a longer power and ground wire. I believe they gave me the one that goes for a Miata because the Miatas have the batteries in the back. I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, I guess a 6. It's not too bad. I mean, I've taken FC dashes apart before and it's a pain in the ass, but the column was pretty easy. I think I just had the most issues just trying to get everything aligned so that I can clear this damn tilt. And ultimately I cut it and that didn't really help much, but it's not squealing or anything, which is fine. It's pretty nutty in terms of the adjustment. Like, if I go full assist, it's excessive. Like, it feels unnatural. So you might be somewhere around the quarter of a turn from completely manual. So to the right, just maybe a quarter of a turn, if that. But like I said, it's all preference. So once I drive it on the road, I'll figure out, okay, this is good, this is not. And then once I actually get back to the track, that's when I'll know, okay, I like the feedback or not. And it's great, I have an adjustment. On the engine bay side, it was great because it cleared up a lot of space. I was able to move my alternator to the right. I got a manual rack. Yeah, my alignment's busted right now, but it's an easy fix. I'll take it to Rob at Shoeworks. But yeah, I hope this video helps people interested in this kit. I posted a video on my Instagram stories. A lot of people hit me up about it. It's off a Saturn Vue, the actual electric power steering unit, and the guys at Electric Power Steering modify it to work for specific chassis, or they have a universal kit. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching.